Good evening, and welcome to our Parent Information Evening for the Post-Secondary Planning Process. Thank you all for coming out, and a special welcome. We are live streaming this event, so that I know there are a few parents out there in cyberspace who are watching. Hopefully this is going through. And the event also, the evening will be recorded and uploaded to the website next week along with the PowerPoint presentation. So if you miss any details tonight that you want to capture again, look for that on the website next week. I have my colleagues here, Ray Casey, Greg Marchand, and Jake Humphreys. Four of us are the University Counselling team here at the school. We serve two roles at the school for all of our grade 10 to 12 students. We are both the academic advisors and the university counselors for all of those students. Our students are assigned to us in grade 10, typically. They come in and they are assigned to one, or whenever they enter the school, and they assign to one of the four of us. And we stay with them throughout their grade 10, 11, and 12 years, or for whatever years they're here at the school. Help them with the academic planning process. We help them select their courses while they're here, talk about things that they might want to do outside the timetable, off campus, in the summer. We go through all the myriad of options that there are out there for students now to learn in different ways and in different places and at different times. We also work with them very closely through all those conversations about what they're going to do while they're here to talk about how that lines up with what they might like to do later on at the post-secondary level. So where they might like to go, things they might like to study, help them to explore some of the really fabulous opportunities that there are for students these days, and that lots of SMU students do take advantage of. As you saw, if you were sitting here for a few minutes while we waited to get going, in the slides at the beginning, those were the 3 pages they put up there were the list of institutions in Canada where students have been admitted. That's for this current cycle of admission. In the US and as well as in overseas, excuse me, internationally. So you can see that there's I think on record, we have a little over 350 acceptances that we know of, that we've heard about from our students. We don't always hear from students exactly where they're going or where they've been admitted until after they decide. But we have already seen that there's some really exciting options that students are taking advantage of for their next phase of their studying plan. When we think about students going into grade 12, there's a fairly intense period during their grade 12 year, especially in the fall as they work towards making those applications, sometimes making final decisions about where they're going to apply, and then work through the application process. And depending on which system, as you'll hear tonight, depending on whether they're applying to Canada, the US, internationally, what that application process looks like is going to be different for each student. So we work really closely with all of our advisees to help make sure that all of those T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and that we can help make sure that those applications get in and the students ultimately have submitted to the places that they're hopeful that they are going to be admitted to. Along the way, there's a lot of work that gets done by the students, by the faculty who write reference letters and who also do a lot of advising of our students, as well as by the University Counselling Office, including our administrative assistant who helps with all our paperwork and processing of transcripts especially. So there's a lot of things that happen all the way through that process that we try and keep all those balls in the air to make sure that students are well supported through the process. What we find is that sometimes when we get into those spots with students, there are times, whether it's academic advising or post-secondary planning, there are times when we want to encourage students to think more diversely or consider other options, and we try and explore those pathways with them to find out what that might look like. To try something new, to take a different course, maybe take fewer courses, maybe take more courses, depending on what the situation is with each individual student. So we work really closely with the kids to get to know them, to try and help be able to give them the best advice we can so that they can make great decisions as they go along in the process of deciding what are they going to take while they're here at SMU, and what ultimately would they like to do when they leave and move on out into the big world. So we work closely with them, and we welcome parents' involvement in all of those processes. So I have a little video here. Disclaimer is that it is a video from SFU, but it's a great little snapshot of how parents, what the role of parents might be in thinking about how to support their children as they go through the post-secondary process. But as you listen to the video, I think you could probably imagine as well that a lot of what was said in the video applies to even going through the high school process. So it's not very long, it's about 2 minutes, and hopefully technology will be on my side today.
son or daughter has just been accepted into university. Congratulations! A university education can be excellent preparation for the type of career opportunities available in the future. But here's the tricky part. Many of us think that career success happens in a clean, predictable way. The reality is, for most of us, life looks a little more like this. So what's a parent to do? First, try not to predict the future. Your child will have many opportunities to grow and develop during their time at school. That comes with pursuing a degree and engaging in collective activities. Steve Jobs said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect you to the future." So how can you help your son or daughter create and connect for their futures? Encourage them to take action, to explore ways of engaging with their community, to create their own set of dots. At university, this involves seeing the degree as more than a series of courses. It involves learning beyond the classroom and seeing opportunities outside of school as a critical part of their university experience. These experiences can help students make connections between their studies and life outside of school. It will help them understand the types of environments they are best suited for, while giving them a real sense of what the working world is like and how it is changing. Not to mention, they'll develop concrete experiences and connections that can lead to future opportunities. You can't predict what the future might hold, but encouraging your child to take every opportunity to create their own dots gives them the best chance for connecting to a world of possibility in the future, whatever that future might look like.
I think what's interesting for me when I saw that video the first time is that it's just a great snapshot of where post-secondary world is now, like how different it is from when I was there 25 years ago, and certainly how different it is from 2 or 3 generations ago, when the expectations, you went in, you got a job, you came out with something, then you got a job. It's very different. Students are going in now with the mindset that when they come out of it, they're going to have to create something, and what they're going to do may not even exist yet. So they're going in, they're learning skills along the way. And I know here at SMU, we work really hard with our students to encourage them to try these different things, whether that be leadership or activities, athletics, or being involved in fine arts programs. All of those things are adding to that experience and helping them to be prepared for that next leap into the great world of post-secondary. Now, we thought we'd give you a real treat, and given that the financing the post-secondary often starts with the parents, so we're going to start with that this evening. We're going to move on from the financing part onto talking about those specific, what it looks like to apply to the different institutions, the different sort of systems, locally as well as internationally, and then talk about some of the resources that we have here at school. So I'm going to pass it off to Ray Casey to talk about financing.
Mm-hmm. Good evening. Had happy news today, and that was that we're already well underway for scholarships. We've now got $1.1 million in scholarships for this current graduating class, and that's likely to become more as we move forward. So great news, certainly in my realm. We're going to start this evening's conversation by talking about what it really does cost to go to university. And if you look at the graph up here, you'll see that one of the most expensive places to attend university is in the United States. There it costs about $60,000 all in. That includes residence and tuition and books and so on. You can add a little bit to that cost when you consider travel as well. And that is true all across the board. If you head off to the UK, it's going to be about $45,000, down to Australia perhaps, between $30,000 and $40,000. And here in Canada, the best bargain of all, around about $25,000. So people from all over the world consider Canada to be, Canadian education to be a terrific bargain. But nonetheless, there are ways to head off and go to all kinds of different places in the world, and we certainly encourage students to live that dream and to consider all sorts of different places to attend university. given that information, it's quite obvious that there needs to be a conversation that takes place fairly shortly in your homes, especially as students are preparing to go on to grade 12, to talk about whether it's possible, whether mom and dad can actually allow you to go on to somewhere else. But certainly the conversation will center around whether it's financially possible to do this. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the options that are open to you for university education and financing that. There are tons of different options for students to come up with the money, starting with you. So they're all hopeful that you've been doing your saving and that you're going to have that little nest egg waiting for them. That's sometimes a possibility and sometimes it's not. And so we go on to some of the other options. Their university tuition may come in the form of gifts. Great Aunt Minnie may have been saving, and so they can look for that. Scholarships, of course, is where I come into the picture with scholarships and bursaries, and then we start to talk about financial aid. So there's money that is given, and then there's money that comes along as a result of what you're able actually to bring to the table with regard to financial aid. So all of these options up here are open to you, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to touch on each one of those tonight. So let's talk about the types of awards that are available. First of all, there are scholarships. Scholarships is money that goes right into your pocket. You don't have to ever pay it back. It comes essentially based on academic merit. Bursaries are similar in that it's money straight into your pocket again, but this time you have to claim financial need. And most of the time this is contingent on the fact that you've already applied for federal and provincial loans, and you're topped up through bursaries that way. And then the final possibility for financial aid is loans, and those are the ones we try to avoid as much as we possibly can, because those ones are the ones that need to be paid back. Now we have lots of different scholarships here in British Columbia. There are the provincial scholarships. These are automatically awarded to a number of students in the province. University entrance awards, major entrance awards, and then private scholarships as well. So we'll talk about each one of those in a little bit more depth. So provincial scholarships. The provincial scholarship is $1,000. Students do not have to apply for this. It comes as a result of their results on provincial exams. And you can see that we start right in grade 10 with the 3 provincial exams in grade 10, plus the provincial exam in grade 11, and social studies 11, and then the final one is the English 12 exam. They have to pass the English 12 exam with a B, and then the province looks at their other scores, and if they score in the top 5,000 students, then they are awarded the $1,000 for the scholarship. They do have to be BC residents, so that's one place where some of our students are caught a little bit. District scholarships, that's another $1,000. Initially, students are given $500, and then another $500 comes as a check directly to the university. So it's $1,000 in total. It's a wonderful scholarship for those students who have a passion in the arts, in debate, in leadership, in sport, all sorts of different areas. They can simply bring their passion to an evening of adjudication and present that passion, and then often are awarded a scholarship. It is the scholarship where you have the best opportunity to win, because currently we compete with just the private schools on Vancouver Island, and currently there are about, I think coming up in a couple of weeks, there'll be 78 awards for just over 100 applicants. So your chances of winning are very, very strong in the district scholarships. So if your students have any sort of passion, whether it's building a cabinet or dancing or debating, then they should come out and go for the Dogwood Scholarship. That $1.1 million is coming primarily through entrance scholarships, and there are a couple of ways that we can deal with university entrance scholarships. The first one is no application required. Students simply do very, very well in school, and their academic merit is judged by each of the each of the universities. So they will present a transcript, and the university will look at their entering average. Usually it is the average for the program that they're applying to. And then sometimes the university simply has a sliding scale, and if a student gets between 90 and 95, they get $2,000. 85 to 90, and so on down to about 80%. So almost every university has that sort of scale. As well as those sorts of awards, they often just have entrance scholarship awards through endowments, which they offer to the students as well. And there's no application required at all. However, there are other bigger scholarships, the major scholarships, where application is required, and in these applications the students are asked to fill in approximately 5 pages, which will outline all of the activities that they've been involved in at the school, their academics, and probably an essay talking about their leadership qualities. So in these scholarships, the universities are looking for those standout students who will come to the university and offer the university something along the way of leadership. So these scholarships tend to be the ones where you'll hear the words full ride. They can be up to $45,000 or so each year. So they're very lucrative, highly competitive. Quite often the students will have to even compete from out of here to get those scholarships, because quite often the universities will say, we'll only take 1 application from your school. Queen's is an example. There's only 1 or 2. From there, Western was 3 or 4, sorry. So there are some scholarships where you have to compete to even get out of the school. Along with all of the scholarships for at the universities, there are tons and tons of private scholarships out there. We just have to search for them. In my office, I keep a file with most of the scholarships in it, but as well, there's lots of information out there on the internet where you can search. There are lots of database search engines where you can plug your name in and come up with information. So there are lots of scholarships out there. One of the things that you can do as a parent is to see whether there is a scholarship offered at your place of work. I know that the Teamsters have scholarships, that CUPE has scholarships, that the Medical Association has scholarships, and so on. So please do check your places of work to see whether there are scholarships offered through those. Most of the major banks will offer scholarships, and many of the service groups in the community will offer scholarships as well. So how do students apply? You need to create a resume in Naviance, which you're going to hear about a little bit later. And so a resume in there will help those people who are writing reference letters for you. They'll certainly help me to determine whether there's somebody out there who is eligible for a scholarship, so on. So create your resume and write a personal statement, because once you've written a personal statement, you can use it for a variety of different applications. So once you've done this once, it's quite easy to move the information on through other applications. Always come to the scholarship office and seek information. We are a fund of information here, and so happy to help out. Make sure that you request your reference letters early, because teachers do want to have lots of time to put into those. Now we'll move on from Canada to the United States. There is money available in the United States. There's not a lot of money available by way of merit scholarship money, but there certainly is money for financial aid. The secret to finding financial aid money is to choose universities that are well endowed, and you can probably imagine who those are. The Ivy League universities, for starters, do have quite a bit of money. You want to look for a university that is reading what is called need blind, which means that they are not looking at your application with regard to whether you need financial help or not. They're just simply reading your application to find out whether you're the student that they would like to have in their university. So that's need blind. Some of them will read need blind and offer 100% of financial need as well. And those are the universities that you really want to key in on if you want a large award with regard to financial aid. Some students or some universities now will read what's called need aware, which means that if they have an application where there's no financial need and another one where there is demonstrated financial need, then they will take that into consideration in making their decisions. And we hear more and more that that is the case with the American applications. But nonetheless, it is possible to apply and to receive lots of financial aid from some of the universities there. The financial aid packages are comprised of a variety of different things. They will offer a scholarship, they will offer grants, they will offer work study, and then they may offer loans. So it comes as a package of financial aid. And it's important to understand the difference between a scholarship and financial aid. Financial aid is based on your income, whereas scholarships are based on merit. Sorry. U.S. athletic scholarships. The important person to contact here is Ms. Kaufmann. Ms. Kaufmann is now the person who looks after all of the students who are seeking financial help through scholarships and athletics. You need to make yourself known to the coaches, because the coaches are not permitted to seek you out, so you must go and talk to the coaches. You can often do this through groups of games that come together. So for example, if you're down in the United States and you're doing one of the superstar tournaments, there may be coaches there and you can approach the coaches, or you can do it by telephone if you're here. You have to prepare a sports CV, and you should be doing videos and all of that sort of thing in order to make up a package that's going to be appropriate for the U.S. All right. So if you need more information, you can check out the university's websites. That's where all of the most up-to-date information will be. If you're seeking loans, you can go to the CanLearn website, which will talk to you about the federal loan system, and the provincial one is also as a link there. You can make an appointment to see me. I'll be happy to help you out with anything that you need to know. I do send out a huge number of emails to the students encouraging them to apply for scholarships. I often will send out an email that will say still more scholarships, and there will be 5 more on there with pertinent information, links, and due dates on them. So encourage your students, and students, please do read your emails. Sometimes I will put these up on announcements, so listen for announcements, and as always, surf the net. And then my last slide is simply a list of links that you might go to source these. I want to just add a caveat to this, and that is, if you go to Scholarships Canada, it is an enormous book. It's about that thick. And that can be confusing because they will list all of the scholarships that are available at UVic, for example, and most of those scholarships one does not have to apply for. So people get wrapped up in that great big book and looking at all of those things and wondering how they're supposed to apply, when really there is no application necessary. So when you're viewing these, just be aware that you can become a little bit confused, because they publish everything just to make it a great big book that people will think they need to read. I think that's about it. Perhaps we can talk a little bit later. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I feel like Peter Mansbridge. Thank you for coming here. It's really wonderful to look out and see so many people. This is a tremendous turnout, and I really do hope that the information is valuable to you. And we will be around afterward if you have any questions. We're not going to stop in between for questions, but I know there will be lots at the end, so make sure that you do ask them. I have the distinct pleasure of talking about applying to universities in Canada. As Ms. Casey pointed out, we do really encourage our students to look all over the world to apply to universities, and they literally do, as those first slides showed you, get into universities all around the world, which is very, very exciting. But we have a tremendous university system in Canada, and most of our students still do end up going to universities in Canada, and that's a wonderful thing because they're phenomenal universities. They really, truly are. The application process in applying to Canada is much simpler than it is in applying to the United States or to the UK. Typically, students apply to 5 or 6, sometimes even more universities in Canada. Each application, as you can see there, costs about $60 to $120. So the price does add up, but it's actually money well spent if the students have done a lot of research and they're very sure that that's a university that they would like to go to. And that's one of the things that we hammer away to students, is to make sure you do as much research as you can before you go through the application process. That will limit the number of applications that you have, and it will also make the decisions way more easy when you actually get those acceptances. So many students now are getting multiple acceptances at universities, and now they're having huge problems trying to decide where they really truly want to go. It's way easier if you do more of that research to begin with. So we really, really encourage students to do that by going online, by attending the more than 80 university visits that are that come to our campus every year, and doing visits themselves. Many families go to travel on spring break or over the summer and find some really wonderful information about universities. And that's a really valuable thing to do. So if you can do that, make sure you do. After you've done the application process, there's more to be done. And in Canada, it's a little bit simpler, but more and more universities are actually asking students to include supplementary information in their application process. UBC, for instance, now has a personal profile that every student in every program has to complete when they're applying. And that's becoming really vital and very important in the application process. We really work with students hard in making sure that the writing that they do in this profile is of the very best quality, because UBC looks very, very carefully at that. There are also supplementary application parts to programs that students are applying to that involve auditions, that sometimes will involve a portfolio. So it's more than just applying with your transcript. But transcript submission occurs at various times. We send all of our transcripts to Ontario universities in December and then again in February. Many students can self-report their grades at various times as well. And we explain to students when they do that, and they have to do a lot of research themselves to make sure that those dates are well in their mind so that they don't miss any of the self-reporting. So the self-reporting process means that students actually submit, using their transcripts, the information of their grades to the universities themselves. And then that's verified by the transcripts we send and the transcripts that come from the Ministry of Education later on. That's the application process in a nutshell. It's fairly straightforward and fairly simple. The admissions decisions, how universities actually decide, is again fairly straightforward. In Canada, it's based on English 12 and 3 or 4 of the highest academic subjects beyond that. Many programs require certain subjects. For instance, if a student is applying to a science program, the math mark and 2 science marks and English mark are the ones that the universities look at to calculate their admission average. But it's very straightforward. It's very simple. Universities are beginning to look at grade 11 marks simply when they don't have the grade 12 marks available to them. Students can apply using the grade 11 marks and get a tentative early acceptance, but it's still formalized with the grade 12 marks. So we always do encourage students to make sure that their grade 11 marks are strong, but it's really the grade 12 marks that the universities use in Canada in accepting the students. Yeah. This is a little game I have for you here. Universities by the numbers. Just one at a time. Can we just? Where do you think that is? 98. My average, yeah, thank you. Any guesses? Well, it's not necessarily an average. It's just a number. It is, well done. Oh, congratulations. The total number of universities in Canada. That's absolutely right, yeah. Most of those universities are public institutions in Canada. In the United States, the Ivy League schools that Ms. Casey talked about are private institutions. In Canada, we have this phenomenal public educational system. There are private institutions. In BC, there are about 5. In Ontario, there are about 17. But most of them are public institutions, and the variety of education that you get is pretty standard in many cases across the board. A variety of different kinds of universities, though, as this number might show you. What do you think that is? No. Close, though. No. It's the average size of universities in Canada. That's the average size. But interestingly, it varies quite greatly. King's College, which is an adjunct of Dalhousie in Halifax, only has about 1,500 students in it. But then the U of T, do you know how many that has? More than 40, 60,000 students at the University of Toronto. So we have a huge range in size, but that actually adds to the spice and variety of them as well. Let's see the next one. Well, that could be almost anything. Let's see, what is it? What is it? That's pretty cool, eh? In the Maclean's ranking, which I have here, UVic this year is ranked #1 in comprehensive universities. So, you can go all the way around the world to go to university, but UVic's a pretty good place, it really is. And so there's no reason why that can't be part of the consideration of students from our school. It's a phenomenal institution, it really, really, truly is. Next one. This was something that someone guessed earlier. That's the average cost, you're right. It's the average cost in dollars for tuition in Canada. Now, Mrs. Casey's slide showed that the overall price is a little over $20,000, but that includes residence and books and meals, et cetera. But that's a tuition cost. It's still it's a huge bargain, really, to go to university in Canada. And my last number here. Average mark. That's actually the average entrance percentage at the University of Toronto. That's pretty high. It is pretty high. And students kind of gasp when they see those numbers. It's even higher in some programs, and UBCs, for instance, are creeping up into the 90s for many of the programs. So it gets a little bit important to be looking at your marks when you're applying to the universities. Not than 85.5, you mean? In most programs it's not. It's slightly lower than that, yeah. Next one. One of the things that, and I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide about trends in Canadian universities, but one of the trends that's happening in Canada overall is the increase in numbers of students who are applying to colleges. And another trend is that the fact that many colleges are now becoming universities, that provinces are changing the college institutions to actual universities, degree-granting universities, which is kind of interesting. This is becoming a great option for a lot of students for a number of reasons, and one of them is the economy. That college gives you an opportunity to have applied skills and the sorts of things that allow for you to have a sure job in the future. And so we always do encourage students to look at the colleges as an option. And they're wide-ranging and a very strong program across the country, strong program of community colleges. So don't dismiss Canadian colleges as an option for students across the country as well. And my last slide, this should be, I did have a trends in Canadian post-secondary education in there, but I'll just as a bit of a summary of some of the things that I've talked about is that because of the fact that we see the cutoff averages rising, and the fact that more and more universities are looking toward including expanded application processes, it's getting more and more important for students to actually be thinking about that. UBC, for instance, because the main reason why they've indicated that they have begun to use their expanded application process is as the cutoff rises, they see more and more students getting into their schools who don't have the kinds of background that they would like, the kinds of background that our students have, that are varied and show a wide range of not just knowledge, but all sorts of activities. So they allow students to tell their own story, a little bit about themselves, which means that the cutoff averages will start to drop a little bit as a variety of students enter the institution. So that's a really, really, I think, important trend in Canadian universities that is happening to us, and that we're seeing more and more. And one of the things that you do sort of gasp at when you look at the fact that the University of Toronto has 60,000 students in it and UBC has more than 40,000 students at it, the universities acknowledge that, and what they try to do is to create what they call cohort programs. And so at UBC, we see the Science 1 program and the Arts 1 program. At the University of Toronto, we see the Trinity 1 program. At King's College, that I mentioned, has, even though it's a small university, they have a cohort program within it. And these allow students to find a niche, an academic niche even, within a larger institution where they make friends and they carry that group through the 4 years that they're at that institution. So Canada has a huge range, even though we sometimes dismiss Canadian options as being not as viable as others. I think that it's really important that we look at those. We look at the options that are available in Canada and the vast array of options that are available in Canada. Again, thanks for coming, and I think I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hopefully the slide will be trends won't come up while I talk about U.S. colleges, but we'll see. It may be inserted in there, and I apologize in advance if it does. The U.S. college system is very different. I didn't put the numbers up, but the number of U.S. colleges, the number is in the thousands. There's about 4,000 U.S. colleges that students can pick from. In the States, what they call college, we interchangeably would say university or college. They also have a system like the community colleges, which they typically call junior colleges. Most of our students coming out of SMU would be applying to a 4-year college program at one of the schools or many schools in the US. It is really important because there's so many to pick from, and they are so different in every way. There's just so many different factors that are to be considered when you're thinking about US colleges. We really encourage our students to have thought really carefully about that, to have talked about it at home, to have done the research and visited if they can, or at least do the online campus tours or anything that they can do to try and get the information to whittle the list down a little bit, because it can be quite unwieldy at times when students are coming in with 16 or 20 colleges that they think they might like to apply to. Unlike the Canadian application process, the American application process is very involved. This makes it look quite simple, but it's not. The common application is the one that about 500 colleges in the US do use. Many colleges that students from SMU would apply to use the Common App. And the Common App is exactly that, a common application process that students can make one application and use that application to send it out to as many colleges as are part of the Common App system. Now, the Common App itself requires students to do an essay. It requires students to list their activities. It requires students to indicate the colleges that they're applying to, and then they get additional paperwork to do, which is in the form of supplements for each of the colleges, very often, but not always, for each of the colleges that they are applying to. So it takes students dozens of hours sometimes to fill out that Common App and to get it right, so that they know that they're making the best application they can for the colleges that they're looking at. When we're working with students on the U.S., especially for the U.S. college application process, it's not as cut and dry as to whether they're going to get in or not. We have in Canada, because it's so simple when they're just a calculation of the admission averages based on 4 marks. In the U.S., they look holistically. They look at everything from grade 9 through to whatever is presented most recently. So typically that would be their fall grade 12 marks. So they're going to look at everything that's been done. They're going to look for trends. They're going to try and see what it is how students have done over time in those courses. Look at the level, the rigor of the coursework they're taking. Are they taking courses that are the most challenging that are available? And of course, here at SMU, with offering over 20 AP courses, we offer a high level of rigor available to our students. So they're looking to see what does your school offer? They come to us, they make presentations here on our campus to our students so that students can hear about their college, and they also make presentations here on our campus so that they can learn more about us. So when they get an application from a student at St. Michael's University School, those people often have been to our school and are looking at that application knowing, oh, it's this kind of school, it's this great place, it's these beautiful facilities, and they have an incredible academic program. So those are all things that are part of the package when students are applying to the US with that common application. There are also, as part of the Common App, students must make requests from teachers, usually 2 teachers, academic teachers, to write letters of reference. So that's a part of the process, as well as having a counselor letter. So whichever of their academic advisors, university counselors they're attached to, we'd also write a letter for that student. And all of that would get sent in for the application process during the fall, depending on, the deadlines vary depending on which schools they're applying to, which programs sometimes, and whether they're applying in an early application process or in a regular application process. So it's a very long and can be a very long and drawn out process. For the students who engage with it and who are fully committed to it, they find their way through it if they are really organized. And very often they come to us to help them be organized. They come to their parents sometimes to help them be organized. And we do our best to try and give you as much information as we can about where to go to find those pieces of information. More and more of that in organization and the application process is almost exclusively done online. So all of the details that you would need about applications and that students need are online, and they're going to be communicated to them online as well. The decision part of it is equally murky at times, unlike the Canadian process. So they are looking at that holistic thing. They're looking at everything the student does. They're looking at who the student is in the context of our school. They want to know how they've been involved, how they distinguish themselves, what have they gotten involved in, how deeply have they been involved in it. Have they been a student who's gone and played three different sports each year, or have they been a student who's played the same 3 sports for 4 years in a row and are now captain of the team in their grade 12 year? So they're looking for that depth of involvement. They're looking to see how they've distinguished themselves on the stage or in the classroom or among their peers in leadership and community service. In all those ways that we here at school do encourage our students to get involved, they are looking that, especially the top tier US colleges are very much looking to see that that is represented. And they're looking to build a class. In the US, especially the most selective US colleges, I'm not sure if you've seen some of the links recently that have come around, but the New York Times, there's been some really interesting pieces about what's going on in the U.S. college system with the applications and the admission process. But Stanford, for example, had, I think, just below a 5% admit rate this year, and they're saying that they're turning away thousands of fantastic students who are almost indistinguishable from the ones that they're admitting. There's just so many great kids out there that are applying for these spots, and the spots are highly coveted at those schools. We work hard with our kids to try and help them find those other schools. So there are great reference books out there. There's one called The Hidden Ivies. There's Colleges That Change Lives. There's lots of books out there that will help students find those unique and fantastic places where they might be a really good fit that they may not have heard of because they don't have the big brand name that some of the Ivy League schools do. For admissions decisions, you also hear sometimes about hooks that students have or hotspots. You hear about hooks, which could be sometimes students who go in, say, with some kind of a legacy hook. So they have had a parent or a family member who've gone to that school. Sometimes that helps students in the process. Sometimes it makes no difference. It all depends on the whole package that the student is presenting in that application. So we do encourage students to think about building a list of U.S. colleges that might include their dream school if where they would just think they died and gone to heaven if they got into it. And then some schools that they have a really good chance of getting in because we know what the admit rates are, we know the kind of student they normally take and the kind of student that kid is. And then we have these safety schools, and we try and help students figure out, okay, what are my safety schools? What are the schools that I would still be really happy to go to, but I'm feeling more confident about the fact that I'm going to get in. Sometimes what students will do when they're thinking about US colleges is they'll build that list, and the safety schools are sometimes Canadian schools, which, as you heard Greg say, there's some fantastic options. And so it's by no means a poor second cousin. They're great options. And for our kids, though, sometimes because they can predict whether they're going to get into those Canadian universities they're interested in, those can really be safety schools as well as part of that big process of looking at the US college system. The fit piece is really important with the US because what I learned in my 5 years of doing this is as I've gone and spent time at US colleges. Last summer I traveled to New York and Pennsylvania, and I visited, I think, 11 colleges in 9 days, which I don't advise. But they're so different. You go to these campuses, and each one of them they're similar. I saw 6 colleges that were similar in terms of size and in terms of location, rural Pennsylvania. But they were all different. They have a different feeling, they have a different vibe, they have a different ethos on the campus, and they're looking for different kinds of students. So we work hard to try and get to know some of those schools, to get to know your students or to get to know you as students, and then help figure out what are some of those places you might look at. And then from those places that we might start with by suggesting, because we've either, from the 4 of us, visited or we know about them or they come and visit us, there then are often what we call overlap schools. And you say, okay, well, if you're interested in this kind of school, maybe you might like these sorts of schools as well. So we try and help students find the schools that are going to be a really good fit for them geographically, depending on sometimes it's weather that's dependent. It could be any number of factors that lead to be that good fit, but we work really hard to try and get to know our students so we can help them find that right fit. The next level we're going to talk about is the UK universities and all sorts of other international options, which Jake's going to speak to.
It's a lot of information. And here comes some more. The Canadian universities have wonderful programs and a great atmosphere, and the US schools are remarkable for their variety. Schools overseas attract our students for the academic reasons, but also for other reasons having to do with culture and adventure. One of the first things I tell my advisees when they have a list of possibilities in front of them is this, that if all the programs are relatively equal in terms of your interest and logistics can be put into place, I always tell them, take the adventure. Take the adventurous option. And this aligns, I think, quite closely with some of the values in our school. Our headmaster is very keen on helping students to find their potential and to push the limits of what they think they can do. Pushing the limits and looking for an adventure and finding potential sometimes requires, for very capable students like yours, that they really fly, and literally somewhere else. My own personal experience with this is that all of my 3 children who graduated here have studied abroad, 1 in Australia, 2 in Europe, and all would say it's an invaluable experience to push yourself and to find your potential by actually doing something that is a bit nerve-wracking and maybe a little bit frightening. So, the UK is a very interesting collection of offerings. Scotland operates a little bit differently than do England and Wales and Northern Ireland. We, in Canada, base our education model on the Scottish model. And so they're a bit more generalist in the way that they approach university education. Commonly, their degree programs are 4 years. In England, things are different. An English student will run through a very rigorous section of his high schooling in order to direct himself right to a university program. And off they go to do that. So when our students compete for those spots, they have to be similarly competent. And they're going to prove themselves, whether it's in the UK or Ireland or Northern Europe or Australia, they're going to prove themselves with their marks. Like everywhere else, the magic is in the marks, and that's where you start. It's a very handy system, the UK system. UCAS stands for University and College Admission Service. It's an online portal, and our students register through a school number. They're allowed to apply to 5 schools, or if they're applying to medicine, just 4. They write 1 all-important essay, and they're permitted 1 all-important teacher reference. They enter their marks. Click send. The actual process is very simple. But I couldn't overestimate the importance of the content of both the personal statement letter that the student writes and the letter that the teacher writes. Very, very important. UK universities are looking for students who are academically aggressive and are already deeply focused on what they want to do. The admission, or sort of the acceptance part of it, is a little bit complex, or can be a little bit complex. If the offers come back and it's simply, yes, we want you, then that's great, but it's not always that simple. Sometimes the universities, especially a place like Oxford, will ask for additional materials. Students sometimes have to send in essay samples and so on. Other times they have to do particular types of tests. If they want to study law or medicine, they've got to do the various tests. And then they do hear back, and they can hear back from all of these different places in order. They don't have to make a decision until they've heard from all of them. But sometimes if you get the response that you really wanted, then students will accept that one and just simply decline the others that are potential. Yes, standardized testing is a question that always comes up. Students want to know if they need to have SAT testing, for example. The answer is no, we don't have to have standardized testing for the UK, but they do appreciate seeing standardized tests. Anything that demonstrates that a student is well placed in a cohort of hundreds of thousands of applicants is a good thing. They also do appreciate in the competitive programs seeing those AP courses that we teach. So those are standardized, of course, as well. Medicine. This is something that many of our students apply to, whether it's in England or in the Republic of Ireland, and they will want to see standardized testing for that. They like to see a strong, very strong kind of academic background, of course, a wide and deep transcript of school courses, but they'll also, in many cases, require the UK CAT, College Admission Test, or the Biomedical Admission Test, BMAT. So generally speaking, I would say that the UK application system is relatively simple, especially compared to the US one, but it requires very high levels of competence and it requires focus. Those are the things that are important. Ireland is a marvelous place to study. If you know Ireland, then you know that part of the attraction there is the people and what they have to offer in terms of their relatively unique outlook on life. Irish universities like Trinity College Dublin, University College Dublin, and so on, these are very strong academic programs. And if you're studying at TCD, for example, you're in a milieu of wonderful programs with deep history you're right on O'Connell Street in Dublin. And it's, you can see students there, if you go there at the start of their year, kind of wandering around just believing that the little people have blessed them with some kind of Irish magic. Because it's a marvelous place to be. At the top there, it's that's University College Dublin, and the one at the bottom is Trinity College, and that is actually the library where the Book of Kells is kept. If you want to do a little research after, quite a marvelous story behind that book. Applying to Ireland is quite simple. They want standard information. Once again, the magic is in the marks, so let's have a nice strong transcript, please. Let's have, in some cases, a couple of letters from teachers, definitely some writing from the student and a resume of activities. And for a common sort of bachelor's degree, that's the type of thing you want. If it's medicine, this is a different situation. Once again, direct out of high school, the same ways you can do it in the UK. But they will need to apply to medicine through something called the Atlantic Bridge Program, which is a collection portal for our students that's actually based in California, but they apply through Atlantic Bridge. They give their various qualifications and all the various materials that are required. They state their preferences, and the Atlantic Bridge Program, if they qualify, will try to place them in an Irish medical school. We have several students from this school studying now in Irish medical schools. Hong Kong, Mr. Marchand has been to Hong Kong, and I should mention that with pretty well all of these international destinations, one of the four of us has been there. So we do come with on-the-ground experience of these places. Now, what could be better for a cultural adventure than to be in one of the most important and active and interesting cities in the world, studying in a culture that's tremendously alive economically and involved in world politics. These universities, many of them teach in English, which is very helpful to students coming from the Western societies who are not fluent in Chinese. But of course, for our Chinese-speaking students, there are university options there that, that teach in Chinese as well. There are 3 of them that do teach in English. They have residence space and scholarship for international students. The competition is fierce, but we have students in our school, some sitting here, who are well able to compete for those opportunities. So what would it be like to study in Hong Kong? They'll use the BC transcript, a nice strong school transcript, deep and wide, lots of evidence of challenge in the transcript, and the American SAT score system as well, which we do a lot of here. I'm sure you're aware, and if you're not, we have a full SAT testing program here, and we are a testing center here at the school. So minimum admission requirement 8% in English 12 from a Canadian high school. That's us. And that, you have to understand when you read minimums, this is the number below which they probably will not go. Pretty well all of our applicants would be submitting an English mark much higher than that, many of them into the 90s. Personal statements, letters of reference. All of these universities say that they value the all-rounder. And that's a little bit different from what you find, for example, in England, where the English universities are interested in the focus. Are you good at chemistry? That's what you want to study here. Are you good at chemistry? Whereas these universities and the US schools as well want to know, are you widely educated? Are you interested in doing more than just one specific thing to begin with? Lots of information on those websites. This is one of my favorite destinations for students for obvious reasons. Powerful, successful economy, a great culture, wonderful flora and fauna, tremendous sporting activity, and an open and very positive aspect in the attitudes of the people. Australia is a wonderful place to be. There are just no end of positive things to say about it, and their universities are one of the very positive things. I had the pleasure of visiting about a half dozen Australian universities and was impressed everywhere with the commitment of the teaching group, with the research that's going on, a lot of it government supported, and with the friendly attitude and demeanor of the students. Online applications are found on their websites. Once again, the magic is in the marks. They want to see everything else you do, and it's curious, in Australia, if I went to admissions offices and asked them about how they evaluate students, they would say, among other things, they want to know what sports, plural, the student is involved in. In Australia, you're commonly not just a one-sport person, you're a 3 or 4 sport person. That's what the culture's like, and that's what the young people are like. It's fantastic. There are some scholarships there too in Australia. We didn't mention that much here, but there are some scholarships available in Australian universities. You have to dig a bit and find them. But students also find one of the other advantages for Australian universities is that one can find a job. Students can find jobs very quickly in Australia and work part-time according to the rules of the Australian government. And your starting wage in Australia would be $18 an hour. Those are Australian dollars. That's the strongest dollar in the world. So, whereas when you start looking at the cost, yes, it's costly, but then it's a 3-year degree, like it is in the UK, not 4. And junior's going to be able to work 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week, 18 bucks an hour for flipping burgers. I've heard parents say, okay, I'm moving to Australia, because that's it's a great benefit for kids to have. Austric and Global Links, they're your online resources. There are some other universities just listed there for you that teach in English, some very top spots there. In the Netherlands, of course, you recognize that a large portion of the population, I think it's 70% of the population, is fully fluent in English. They speak English. If you go into Amsterdam or Rotterdam or Utrecht, any of these places, and you just can carry on a conversation with anybody at any time pretty well. The universities are greatly respected in the world, and there are lots of English language programs. These other ones, Copenhagen Business School, to one of the top business schools in the world, Sciences Po in France, Stavanger in Norway, Bonn, Riga Technical Institute. The National University of Singapore is a university where all programs are taught in English, and it's right at the top of the QS rankings. So there are these opportunities all over the world for students to study in English, to be in an exciting and interesting place, somewhere that's inspiring, somewhere that gives you a real capital A adventure. And when is it better in your life to try this sort of thing than when you're 18 or 19 years old? I wish that I was 18 years old again in order to be able to try to do this kind of stuff. But I'm not. So, as my kids remind me all the time. Okay. So, are you going to want to? Okay. So I'm going to hand back over to Allison. To just, I hope that the students that are sitting here are inspired to investigate international opportunities and do the full investigation. Find out what it costs. Find out what it'll be like to live there. Find out the programs. Make sure they're there for you. English language instruction, and I think you'll find that your view of what's possible, your potential, kind of goes like this. And if you're young enough, grade 10 or 11, you have time to put this in place. Thank you.
Okay, 5 more minutes and then we're done. At the back, as you exit, you'll find on a table out there, if there's any left, there are a few view books. So the view books are what the universities call their little brochures, their pamphlets. Over the years, they've ranged from large to small. They got smaller for a while there, and the universities are now kind of putting them back out bigger again. But what you'll find in there is that these are the view books from this year that we received. We do get new ones each year, but we put a selection of them that were out that we had in our offices just in case you wanted to see them. You can also usually see in there the kinds of things that are required for programs for admission to different programs at the universities, as well as some of the different options that they have for housing and for other student opportunities on campus, be they activities or student services of some kind or another while they're there. So please feel free to take those and take them home with you. You can pour over them as some of our students do. We also have I put 2 documents up there. One is just a little brochure, a little trifold brochure that just sort of explains what we feel is the process that we encourage students to go through as they plan and prepare for this post-secondary process, and that we work carefully with them. We do see the students in HCE 9, some of the grade 9 students in the room. I've seen you in there. We also see them in Planning 10 for a period of time to talk about the education and career learning outcomes that are associated with Planning 10. And then we work with the grade 11 students starting in January of their grade 11 year for 6 months. And we work with grade 12s from September through to January to help them through the application process. And we see them once during our 10-day cycle, our academic program, 10-day cycle, to help keep students on track. In grade 11, we really encourage students to explore and to check out all the opportunities that are out there, to learn more about the things that they are interested in, be they business or medicine or social sciences or fine arts, or any number of other possibilities. And we also do talk about Australia and Hong Kong and Canada and the US and all these other exciting places there are. So if your kids are coming home talking about that, we may have planted some seeds, and we hope that you're on board with that, or that you can have the conversation with them about whether that's a good option for them. I'm going to show you one thing. We have a fabulous resource that we subscribe to as a school called Naviance. Naviance is something that all our students from grades 9 through 12 actually now are using in their HCE or planning classes. And if I can find my way back here, she says confidently. Apparently I can't. That'll do. That will not do, sorry. If I can find my way to the school website, which I had up here a second ago. We have on the school website, if you're on the website and you go into the intranet, what I'm going to do tomorrow is you're going to, in your inbox, I'll send it to all grade 9 to 12 parents, a link from Naviance Family Connection. And the Naviance site is one that we use with our students, that we use as part of the application process for the US application process, but also increasingly for the Canadian one, as we're now able to send Canadian transcripts using the same database, which is called Naviance.
You want to try to find it and I'll just field some questions?
I've got it, yeah. So Naviance, what it does is it allows students, it's a place where students can deposit information, so they can list the colleges that they're applying to, the universities that they're interested in. It's our tracking for what they're doing with their applications. But we also use it very intensely in the research part of things. So I'm just going to show you quickly. You will get a login. You'll get something from Naviance Family Connection in your inbox. It'll give you a login if you haven't already logged in before. It'll use your email address that we have for you from SDS that we've put into the system. And then you'll have a temporary password, and you have to set up your own password. But as families, you can go in, you can see your student, see all of the things that I'm going to show you here. The colleges one is just the quick one I'm going to show you now. If you click on the colleges tab in here, you get to this option to do this super match college search. So Naviance has built in this college search that you can do by setting a whole number of parameters. So they've in order to find that fit. So you can choose by school type, by ethnicity, by size. You can choose by whether you want a public or private. You can, one of the ones that some students will look at is to say, I want to know all the colleges that show me, where I can go and I can play women's field hockey, for example. There's not that many of them, but there are out there, and they are listed in Naviance, so they can do the match. There's a lot, just a ton of resources on here that are great for parents to know about. We certainly take our students through it. We use all of the 3 colleges, careers, and the About Me tab as a place for gathering information about your children, and also giving them information or giving them access to information that hopefully will be useful for them in the process. We certainly welcome your involvement in the process. If at any time you want to be in touch with your child's academic advisor, please do that. Please feel free to do that at any point. We have parents in our offices all the time for meetings, with the students sometimes, without the students sometimes, and we're very keen to have you involved as much as you'd like to be involved. Okay, there endeth the chatting. If you have questions, if anyone wants to ask any questions right now, we're happy to take them. We also can adjourn, and we'll hang around out there where the coffee and whatever's left of the view books and the cakes are. So I don't know if there are any questions. Yes?
Can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yes. Yeah. I'll put it up it'll go up on the school website.
There's some buzz in the media recently about the SAT changing. Do you have anything to say about that, or what the status of that is? Or?
It's going to change for students who are currently in grade 9, if I'm correct. Is that right? I'm looking at you to nod. I think that's right. If they're currently in grade 9, they will be the first cohort that goes through the testing, the new version of the testing, where they've reduced it back to a 1,600-point test.
If you have access to the Khan Academy, have you ever seen any of that? They have really great information about. They're actually teaming with the College Board to present a course on the new SAT. So that information is going to be on there for free on the Khan Academy. I think it's really worth looking at.
Do any of you have an opinion about that change?
I've looked at the changes quite closely, and I don't think it will be of any detriment to anybody here. Perhaps it will be an advantage. They're making the changes, as they commonly do with the SAT system, to deal with social and cultural pressures in the U.S. But it won't be a problem for us. It will be an advantage, if anything.
I think one of the reasons why is that the ACT is rising in dominance. They're competing tests, and the SAT has always been looked at as an exam that's very vocabulary centric, and some students find that difficult, and especially non-English speaking students. The ACT has become a little bit easier for some students in that respect, and I think the SAT is acknowledging that and changing the parameters. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
So would UK schools look more at the ACT than the SAT, or do they?
UK schools will look at whatever standardized testing you present, but they're not looking for it, if you understand what I'm saying. An application isn't put to the side because it doesn't have that testing on it. They expect that testing from American students, but not from Canadian students, or students educated in Canadian schools. But if you have good ACT scores or good SAT scores, you would put them in there. It's just further evidence of academic capability.
Yes?
Do you have any information about how UBC used personal profile in their admission decisions specifically?
The UBC this is their third application site. I was at a meeting at UBC a month or so ago with a group of counselors, and it was very interesting to hear them talk about the evolution of the process of how they use it. So they typically will read that personal profile a minimum of 2 times, and sometimes up to 5 times by 5 different readers. So there's always at least 2 different readers who use it. Some programs, like Sauder, the School of Business, states that there's a 50%. They look at 50. They put the weighting of 50% is on the personal profile. So they're looking really carefully at that to see what students are involved and how it lines up with what they're applying to, especially in the case of applying to something like the business program, and to see the way that. What students have learned from the experiences that they talk about. That's what they're looking for. They're looking to see that students are articulate, that they spell. It sounds sort of. It's interesting to when I heard them say it. But they said we really want to see that students are paying close attention to how they write, that they are writing in full sentences, and that they are using punctuation appropriately, and that they spell appropriately, and that those are all pieces that they consider as part of the process. So they're just looking to see that they can have a more diverse student population, I think, is a big part of it, is to know that they're bringing in students, not just students who can get 92% average in their science courses to their science faculty, but also students who are involved in a whole host of other things. There's some interesting information on the UBC website where they talk about the personal profile, and if you look at there's a couple of little videos they put up this year, and as you look at the videos, it's interesting because you can also glean from that what it is that they're looking for in it and what they're looking to see in there. Yes.
Although the students may choose to go internationally to attend the universities, that when they completed their education, do most of them come, or what are the restrictions to getting a job here?
That's a huge question. It so depends on what they're applying to, where they're coming back, how. For example, some of the British universities have some interesting sort of cohorts within their medical programs, for example, to kind of stream those students who are looking to come back to the U.S. or Canada. And so St. Andrews, University of St. Andrews, University of Edinburgh have these sort of cohorts that they've designed in conjunction with the University of Alberta. So they have this partnership going. And so there are some, you see a lot more of that happening, and I think that's probably the trend, is that more and more of that is happening as there's that cross-pollination among the universities even. But it really just depends on what the student is applying to and which, especially in those professional programs. In those professional program, the Canadian Law Society, for example, it recently changed what they would accept on the way back for students who are trained overseas and then wanting to come back and be lawyers in Canada, but only have 3 years out of high school. So it's hard to nail down an answer. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Outside of the corporate world, how important is university prestige?
That's a great question. It depends on what you read. I was reading 2 articles today. One said, it doesn't matter. Google says that half of the people they apply, they could care less about which university you go to and what your GPA was. And then you could read another op-ed piece, and it'll say that the most important thing is the alumni connections you have because of the university you went to and the
I read Malcolm Gladwell's new book.
There you go, yeah.
David and Goliath. In there, he argues that the prestige of a university can sometimes be counterproductive in the sense that the competition is so much more fierce that you almost have a better, not almost, he uses statistics to show that graduating from a university that's not one of those top tiers, I shouldn't be saying this perhaps, but graduating from one of those, it can actually be a benefit because you're not competing as much as you are in the top tier.
Yeah, you have that ability within that smaller university maybe, or a different university, to shine in a way that you might not if you go to Harvard or Brown or Columbia or Yale or one of those schools. So
sometimes it can get you in, but won't keep you.
It's true too.
It's true.
Yeah. So it's
Mr. Marchand, just one question. Sorry,
Go ahead.
Because we're talking about Canadian universities. Do the Canadian universities have a cap on the number of international students they take?
They don't advertise that there's a cap. The international numbers are rising in all of the Canadian universities. So I don't think it's a detriment in that sense.
If they don't have a cap in terms of the number of students they're taking, do they
Sorry?
If they do not cap the number of international students coming into the university, do they cap, for instance, the number of students entering a particular program?
Well, there's always a finite number for competitive programs, of course. So that does happen. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Please feel free to contact us at any time. Thanks for coming.